Hey everyone, it's Allison with Bloom Culture, and in today's tutorial we're going to learn how to do a DIY fall wreath. First, you'll want to pick out the pieces of greenery or foliage that you'll want to use. You'll want to treat the faux greenery and floral very similarly to fresh, as you'll break down the bunches or the stems into more manageable sizes. Once you've got some smaller sizes of the stems to work with, do some test runs with each piece so that you make sure it fits the placement you want and has the right bend. Once you find the right pieces for the right placement, I usually cut a few short pieces of the paddle wire off, about 2 inches in length each. That way you have them at the ready when you are securing the greenery to the wreath. It also saves you some time from having to put the greenery down and cut a few pieces, so cut a whole bunch. Securing the faux greenery with the paddle wire is pretty easy, but it does require some finesse. I usually loop it through some of the vine and twist it once, like a twisty tie on a bag of bread. Then I wrap it around the vines, or whatever wreath structure you have, to secure the placement. It may take a few tries, but you'll find a rhythm that works for you. Okay, now that that's done, I'll be sure to speed up that process for the rest of the tutorial because we don't have all day here. Okay, continue to secure the greenery around the wreath every few inches to ensure it doesn't move or slip when it's hung vertically. Work your way up the wreath with the greenery until it's fully secure, then move on to the next piece of greenery. This is when you're glad you prepped at the beginning and cut all of your stems down and made smaller pieces to use. It definitely makes the process go a little faster. I'll start with one type of greenery, then layer in additional varieties until it feels complete. Here I've used 3 types of faux greenery. This one is what I would consider an autumn eucalyptus. Just like with the first greenery, do a few test runs to see if you like the placement. If you do, continue to secure it to the wreath. You'll see that with this variety, I'm not using a straight run like with the first. I'm sort of working in a zigzag to fill in spots and spread out the placement of this type so it's not covering up the first variety. With some pieces, I'll use hot glue. But Allison, how do you know when to use hot glue and when to use wire? So I typically use the wire when the wreath structure is easily accessible. If you have to search for the wreath, I usually use a small bit of glue and secure it that way, as it takes less time and you don't run the risk of moving everything you've just worked hard to secure. Moving on to our last variety of faux greenery, this looks similar to leatherleaf and I love the coloring on it. These leaves are a tad big for the wreath, so I'm going to cut them down a bit. Don't be afraid to break down the leaves even more to create a scale that works for your design. Once I've filled in the wreath with some of the other varieties, I noticed that the top of the wreath was a little fuller than I had anticipated, so I went ahead and added another piece of the first greenery so that it would look a little more elongated and a little bit more whimsical. Once I have my base layers of greenery placed, I start placing larger focal flowers. Here I've used the large white sunflowers. I take a look at each size of the blooms and decide how big I want them to be. I've used the smaller blooms on the bunch because our wreath structure is pretty thin and I want to keep the scale consistent. Sometimes when you're using faux flowers, they can be a little smushed or the bloom may not be as ideal as you want it to be. Don't be afraid to sort of manhandle it a little bit. You can flex the flowers, flex the petals, and sort of push them in the direction that you want them to go. This is kind of our way of spinning the rose, if you will, to help it bloom. You can actually manually manipulate these to help the blooms look a little bit more pretty. I'm using the larger focal flowers, such as the sunflower, on the bottom of the wreath so that it anchors our design. You don't want something heavy to be too far up because it's not going to hang right whenever you have it vertically on your door. Since this design is an asymmetrical wreath design, once I've secured the sunflowers in place, I want to finish out the other side of them with some more greenery. If you want this to be a full wreath design, finish your greenery placement all around the wreath before moving on to flowers. After greening the right side of the sunflower, I move on to the faux Burgundy Zinnia. I sort of zigzag my way up the left of the wreath, thinning out towards the top. Next up are the golden mums. I do the exact same thing as I did with the zinnia. I zigzag my way up the wreath with individual blooms, either gluing or wiring them in place. Next up is our filler flower. There are a few components to this filler flower, so I use the spray part and the linear part in separate areas. Use it to fill in any spots that need filling, and use the wispy stems to create a somewhat whimsical moment. I'll be honest, I have no idea what this is supposed to be. I wish I did, but that's the beauty of faux flowers. They can make whatever they want, so for this tutorial, it's just filler flower. Like I said earlier, some of the flowers can get a little squished or become a little flat. It's okay to fluff them or to make them open up a little bit more before placement. Last but not least, I fill in with the mauve preserved bunny tail. I love this stuff. It's great texture and adds a modern touch to this fall classic. Here's a pro tip. Take small bunches of the grass, maybe 3 to 5 stems, and use stem wrap to group them together. This makes them more manageable since they are such a small scale product. Grouping them gives them more of a focus and helps their color come through a bit more. Once you're done placing the bunny-tail grass, take a once-over of the wreath, hold it upright, and secure anything that may move. I like to hang it up on the door to make sure that I haven't missed any spots. Doing this, I added a few more zinnias and mums to fill in a few areas that I missed when it was laying flat. Well, that completes our DIY fall wreath tutorial. If you guys have any questions or comments, please leave them in the comments below, or you can always email us at hello@bloomcultureflowers.com. I'm Allison with Bloom Culture Flowers, and thanks so much for watching.